Hello, Mark from Sound Matters here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about record weights and record clamps. Both claim to improve the sound of your records, but do they really work? And which one, if so, is right for you? Let's delve straight into the topic today and find out. Weights and clamps undoubtedly divide opinion amongst the vinyl community. Some swear by their benefits, others dismiss them as pure snake oil. But I sit in the camp that I think they do make a difference. But what we're talking about here is optimization, not revolution. So, if you're looking for an absolutely amazing veil-lifted moment, dramatic uplift in the sound quality of your record playback performance, I don't think record weights or clamps should be your first port of call. Instead, I would say look at perhaps your turntable and cartridge. Start there, start at the beginning of the signal chain and work your way through the signal chain from there, and then look to optimize once you're happy with the bass sound that you're getting. But how do record weights and clamps actually work? Well, a record weight applies mass to the disc, whereas a record clamp applies pressure. The idea being that we improve the contact between the record and the platter surface, or the turntable platter mat, of course, and therefore prevent slippage, improve tracking performance, and help dampen vibrations and resonances. Now, to some, that might sound crazy, but when you consider how microscopic the process of tracking a record is, it's easier to understand how imperative keeping a record stable really is. By improving contact with the platter, we create this coupling effect, which reduces micro wobbles and dampens unwanted resonances. The more stable the record is, the less resonance we'll have, and the cleaner the sound will be. Think of it like this. If your mobile phone vibrates on a table from a call and you apply some weight or pressure, the noise reduces. Rather than rattling around, the vibrations are more easily able to dissipate elsewhere. If you have an acrylic platter or similar smooth surface like glass or the Sound Deck platter mat that I use on my Technics turntable, you will also find that weights and clamps help prevent record slippage. But what about the pros and cons? Well, both products actually do a really similar job when it comes to the base idea of just improving the contact between your record and the platter surface, but there are some differences and pros and cons to each. Firstly, record weights add mass, which helps increase the inertia of the platter to achieve a more consistent speed, resulting in improved wow and flutter. Essentially, once the now heavier platter gets up to speed, it has greater momentum and is thus more resistant to change. The criticism of adding more weight is the potential for increased strain on belts, motors and bearings. Check your turntable can actually support the additional weight before using one. It's very important to do that. I use a 14-ounce record weight from Groove Washer. That is fairly modest compared to some weights. Anything more heavy than that would make me somewhat nervous. Record clamps, on the other hand, are typically much lighter. This model from Project, for example, weighs only a little over 4 ounces or 120 grams if you prefer that measurement, and it applies pressure as you screw down the handle. But what about the benefit in terms of warped records? You've probably heard about this. Well, both of these products can help to a degree mitigate the problem when it comes to mildly warped records, and this of course again improves trackability and therefore sound quality. I find that both products do a good job of improving contact near the center of records, but they are much less effective on the outside, meaning you still get a wobble, albeit sometimes reduced. If the record is distinctly bowl-shaped in its warp, then you'll find that the weights and clamps work very well on the side that's convex, but not so well on the other more concave side. This is of course due to the fact that all of the pressure is being applied at the center of the record where the label is, so when you flip it onto a concave side like that, it's the outside that's sticking up and the center that's got contact with the platter surface. So therefore, applying pressure in the center like that does very little to help flatten the outer edge. If you do have a record that is warped like this, then really it's either time to, if you can still return it to the record store. If you're stuck with it, then it might be worth looking at flattening products like the vinyl flat, for example, which applies pressure and a mild amount of heat to correct permanently the warp rather than trying to put a plaster on it like something that you're doing with like a record weight or a record clamp. Now, we haven't explored all of the options today. There are some very fancy, expensive options that vacuum the record to the platter surface. Some turntables will allow you to do this that I've seen. Absolutely crazy money, or there are products that apply that vacuum for you. I think really today I'm talking about those more accessible turntable accessories, such as record weights or clamps, because really I think the average Joe like you or I, that's what we're going to be looking at. And if we can't correct the warp, we're using something like this, then really we're looking at a vinyl flat, or returning the record, or buying a new copy. So finally, it's the million-dollar question. Do they really make a difference, and which one should you buy? Well, I would say yes, they do make a difference, but as I stressed earlier, it is optimization, not revolution. As I say, so if you're expecting an absolute amazing uplift in your sound quality, then I would go looking at upgrading your phono cartridge, your phono preamp, that side of things. This really is just optimizing, squeezing more out of your rig as it is at the moment. But overall, I do think they help produce a tighter, more focused sound across the frequency spectrum, and they can be handy with some of those mild warped records as well. What I will personally likely do going forward is default to using the record weight with my Technics direct drive turntable, and then reserve the clamp more for the Project X1, which is belt driven, to help alleviate any potential strain on that belt going forward. And if you think about it, that's kind of what Project are almost alluding to, because they produce a clamp but they don't sell a weight. So it's almost as though, because they produce predominantly belt-driven turntables, and often a lot of them are actually quite affordable budget turntables, they're suggesting that perhaps it might be safer for most of their users to default to a clamp. But just to summarize in terms of the pros and cons, record weights add that mass, great for that inertia process. They're also much easier to get on and off most turntables. The clamps can be a bit of a faff, but the clamps have that added benefit of being much lighter, and you can actually control to a degree the amount of pressure that you're applying at the same time. So really it is pros and cons, and I stress once again, you do need to check with your turntable manufacturer to see whether this is actually appropriate full stop. A lot of suspended turntables are a big no-no when it comes to applying weights, for example. So check with your manufacturer before making any final decisions. So what are your thoughts on record weights and clamps? Hopefully that's a nice summary, help you make the decision for yourself. If you have any further questions, do of course pop those in the comments as well. If you'd like to support this channel further, help me produce content like this on a weekly basis, then you can do so by supporting me either on Patreon at the link in the description below, or there's the usual discount codes from my partners and sponsors where you get money off vinyl gear at no extra cost to you. I get a very small commission, helps me, as I say, continue to produce this content on a weekly basis. I appreciate your support. If you're new to this channel, please do consider subscribing. I'd love to have you on board. And until that next video, do keep spinning and enjoy the music.